What is up, everyone? Happy Friday night, Halloween Eve. Our families, Ryan and I, our families are all over the place getting last minute preparations done. I am Matt Prino. He is Ryan Talbot. We're joined tonight by Chris Mason from MassLive.com. He's their Patriots beat reporter. We got a big game to talk about. But Ryan, you said the kids are off to a trunk or treat tonight to get ready.
Trunk or treat. I was kicking them out the door. I'm like, come on, I've got a pod that we have to get going. They were taking their time, getting their costumes on, but they're pumped and ready to go for this weekend.
And Chris, we talked about it a little bit before we started. You guys aren't traveling on the road this year. We aren't either. Obviously, COVID situation. This is a good week not to be traveling because it's supposed to be an absolute monsoon here on Sunday. But you guys got some snow today?
We did. We got 3 inches. So happy October, right?
Exactly. All right, we got a big game to get into, and I'm not going to waste any of your time here because the excitement level for Patriots week, in Buffalo is always like massive. Like people get really amped up for it. Before we go any further, I always forget this because we're always chomping at the bit. This is the Shout Buffalo Bills Football Podcast. We are sponsored by Tops Friendly Market, your neighborhood store with more. Make sure you head over there on Sunday because we all know the supermarkets, they discount all the candy the day after Halloween. So I'm gonna be hopping over to Tops on Sunday morning, stocking up. Even though I'm sure my little one, because I don't think the kids are gonna go too hard trick or treating this year because with COVID, I don't know how many houses I want them to go to and all that kind of stuff. So it's a whole new year. But let's jump right into this thing. And I think all of a sudden here, late last night, early today, the number one storyline that's now kind of rising is Stephon Gilmore and his potential availability for Sunday. He injured his knee on Thursday, didn't practice today, listed as questionable. Chris, what's going on there?
Yeah, apparently he tweaked it at practice yesterday. And I mean, anytime a player doesn't practice on Friday, that's a pretty bad sign for their availability, because that's usually a walkthrough day. And if you can't get out there for the walkthrough, then what's going on? And it's not just Stephon Gilmore. J.C. Jackson was a surprise on the injury report today, too. So he's another really important piece of the Patriots secondary. So they're both questionable. And yeah, a lot of question marks coming into the game. The Patriots have 11 players listed on there. It's questionable.
Wow. And with Gilmore, I think that he's such an interesting, topic. Obviously Bills fans very familiar with him. He was here in Buffalo before he went to New England. But let's start with if he can't play. You mentioned, there's some other injuries going on there. But what does this secondary potentially look like without Stephon Gilmore back there?
I mean, it's certainly going to be different. I think everyone just kind of assumed that Gilmore would be on Diggs in this game, right? Like that's your premier matchup. That's what you're going to do. But then J.C. Jackson would be the next guy who I would think they would match up with him. And now he's not there either. So you still have Jason McCourty at one corner. You could move Jonathan Jones has played a lot in the slot. You could move him out to the other corner. But I think this obviously affects the game plan a lot. When you're definitely going to need more help. You're going to need more, safety play. So yeah, we'll see.
I was going to ask you if you're looking for a house because I heard that Stephon Gilmore has one on the market right now. Close to the stadium, good proximity. Odd coincidence, something more to it. Do you think there's something to that? Because Albert Breer said that they were talking about moving him before the season. Obviously, premier number one cornerbacks don't hit the market that often. So do you think that the Patriots are serious about trying to maybe move him at the trade deadline?
If they lose this game, I think they will be. I think this game is just huge in terms of what the Patriots are going to do because they fall to 2-5 here, lost 4 games in a row. Then I think you might see maybe not a total fire sale, but the rebuild has to start, right? And Gilmore is a very attractive piece on the trade market. He's 30, so I'm not sure if you get a first rounder for him, but even if you get a second rounder, he's got a big cap number, which that was another thing where they restructured his deal at the beginning of the year because he wanted more money. He might want another raise. And to be honest, I don't think his play hasn't really been close to what it was last year when he was the defensive player of the year. He's still a very good cornerback, but there's also times where it looks like he's just not totally engaged out there.
It's funny you bring that up. That going back to his time in Buffalo, and obviously that was before I covered the team, but growing up around the team and following them, that was one of the things that always kind of stood out to me. The highs were very high, but there were times when, he didn't play up to what I thought the really good tape that he put out there at times. And obviously you go back to that Buffalo scenario where he was basically playing, in a losing culture on a losing team. And all of a sudden you get, into this situation here. You guys are, the Patriots are 2-4. It's kind of a whole different world that he's living in New England, after years and years of success. Do you think that kind of might be playing into this at all?
I think it certainly could. And I mean, he's taken, I think it's something like 4 penalties already this year. He had like 1 all year last year. And a couple of them have been lazy, where it's like he's just reaching and grabbing when he doesn't need to. And last week against the 49ers too, there were a couple of plays where, he's in position to make a tackle, and it looks like he just doesn't really want to make that tackle. So, yeah, I think the engagement does look different this year.
There was always some talk in Buffalo too about the willingness to tackle. But going back to what you said about his play, some Bills fans have said the same thing about Tre'Davious White. Hasn't played at the level as 1 year ago. Could it be to do with anything with all the opt-outs, with all those players on, the D linemen, the linebackers that aren't playing or that are injured and banged up, that maybe are affecting his play in the secondary? I could see how that happened in Buffalo, where maybe the Bills aren't getting enough pressure, so then the wide receiver has more time. So what do you think is factoring into Gilmore maybe not playing at the same level as he did 1 year ago?
I think, first of all, he set a ridiculously high bar last year, right? That we're comparing him to now, where it's like you're the defensive player of the year as a corner for the first time in like a decade or so. But beyond that, I don't know if it's the team's record. I don't know if it's just like a general effort thing. But, as far as like the Patriots opt-outs, they haven't made a huge difference in the secondary. They did lose Patrick Chung, but I don't think that has been like a deal breaker for Stephon Gilmore. I think it's just more of a Gilmore thing than anything.
Lot there to digest, but let's move to the offensive side of the ball for the Patriots, because I think that's one of the areas where, this week, if you're a Bills defense that has been struggling this season, last week against the, hapless Jets, they got right a little bit and, holding them to 10 points, 4 yards in the second half, but it's still the Jets. Before that, 5 straight games of 20 or more points. So looking at this New England offense, let's start with Cam Newton. And, I'm very interested to dive into the whole dynamic of Cam and what that has been like these last few months as they've tried to get him up to speed, get him ready to play. Because one of the things that Ryan and I talked quite a bit about was, okay, he signs, I believe was it June when he signed?
Yeah, I think it became finalized in early July, but yeah, the agreement was in place late June.
Okay, so they basically had 2 months before the first game, and the first game is the regular season, opener. And it's like, all right, we installed everything. We brought you up to speed on everything. No practice, like game reps, just go do it. And so I always thought that this was kind of set up to fail. So how have they tried to get him up to speed? How has it worked? Because it seems like a couple times this season, it has worked okay. So how is that all going on in terms of how it's played out?
See, that's really fascinating, because right out the gate, the first 2 games are by far the best the Patriots offense looked this year. And since then, they've regressed. And I think a lot of that is in the opener, Newton carried the ball. They did a ton of read option stuff. It was a lot of, things that you'd expect to see with Cam Newton. But he ended up carrying the ball 15 times in that win. So I think that turned into like, this guy's not going to last 16 games carrying the ball 15 times. It's just not sustainable. And then they went to Seattle, and he threw for like 397 yards, and they lit up that Seahawks defense. But now you kind of find out that's fool's gold, because everybody lights up that Seahawks secondary. They're just not very good. And then here, obviously, he had the COVID thing thrown in there. It was kind of a curveball, but his looked as bad as a quarterback can look the last couple of weeks, between decision-making, mechanics, all of it. And he's not really carrying the ball as much anymore, which I think is something that, brings him confidence and like brings his game up. But that just hasn't really been happening.
What's going on with not throwing to his right the last 2 weeks? 3 throws, I believe, in the last 2 weeks, none last week at all.
Yeah, so that's a bizarre thing, and the coaches don't really have an answer for it. They're like, oh, it's coincidence that just happens that way. But I think that's an alarming thing, right? That's a third of the field that you're just not throwing to. So there hasn't really been any sort of like concrete reasoning for it that's been offered, but it's definitely something that's showing up on the film. And I mean, last game, he only ended up throwing the ball 15 times. 3 of those were picked off, and he was benched for Jarrett Stidham.
Speaking of Stidham, he threw an interception as well. Is Newton playing for his job at this point? Is there really no threat on that roster as of this time?
So that's the thing. I don't think Stidham is knocking at the door. And it's funny, Belichick has reverted to this very, like, throughout, like, this whole season, and especially with their COVID outbreak, everything is hour by hour, day by day. We're taking it hour by hour. But when he was asked after the game, is Cam Newton your starting quarterback moving forward? He said absolutely. It's not like, oh, we'll see how practice plays out. We'll see. It's like, no, he's absolutely still starting quarterback. So I think more than anything, that speaks to the gap between Newton and Stidham right now, where they don't think he's that close. If they thought Stidham was really pushing for the job, then I think that answer is, oh, we're taking hour by hour. We'll see. We're moving, one day at a time.
So, oh no, go ahead.
And then you saw Brian Hoyer in that Kansas City game, so he's also not close.
We're talking so much about the quarterbacks and how bad they, have been at when they played Stidham, Cam the last few games. He doesn't really have a lot to work with. Even when Julian Edelman was healthy and N'Keal Harry were healthy. I mean, at this stage of Julian Edelman's career and the kind of awkwardness of the transition from Tom Brady to Cam Newton, that I think anybody was going to have no matter what. I mean, I don't care if it was, Michael Thomas or DeAndre Hopkins. That's this version of Cam, especially this recent one, the last few weeks, it's just a little bit different from Tom Brady, who on target, on point every time he throws the ball, it's going to generally be there. But Julian Edelman's out. He hurt his knee this week, or he had surgery on his knee this week. Concussion protocol still for N'Keal Harry. Who is going to be catching the ball for the New England Patriots on Sunday?
I mean, I think this impending monsoon is probably the best thing that could happen to them, where, they're just not going to be throwing the ball if you're getting those 50-mile-an-hour winds. But they're very thin there, where Damiere Byrd has actually played more snaps than anyone else this year. I guess he's your number one receiver. Jacoby Myers is someone that hasn't played a ton. He might be in there. Gunnar Olszewski is also there. And then you're going to see, I think, at least one practice squad elevation. So they're pretty thin there, and they're thin at tight end too.
Go ahead, Ryan.
I was going to say, among the practice squad players, I don't know how if you have like a rankings in your mind, but I heard some talk about Zuber. Is that how you say his name? Is he maybe the top guy to come up if it is a practice squad elevation?
Yeah, I would definitely think it's Isaiah Zuber of that group to come up. He's been active for 3 games already, which I think 2 of those were technically COVID related. So they have the weird practice squad rules where you can be elevated 3 times. So yeah, I would expect it to be Isaiah Zuber, who we still haven't seen a ton of. He was an undrafted guy. They like getting the ball in his hands on jet sweeps because he's fast. Done that a couple times on film, but he'd be the most likely next candidate, I think.
You mentioned running the ball. I think that's the expectation, to see a lot of that on Sunday, whether it be Cam, Damian Harris, who popped up on the injury report. He's averaging 5.7 per carry this year. Before Sony Michel went on the IR, he was averaging close to 7. So, I mean, the running game seems to have been working for the Patriots without, being there watching every game. How has that worked, and how do you think, relying on that will work for them on Sunday?
See, I think the running numbers are tougher to look at because it's been really feast or famine, where they've had 2 games of over 200 yards on the ground where they just absolutely bullied the Dolphins and the Raiders. But they've also had 2 games where they've had less than 100 yards. And, I think smart teams, like, the more film there is on Cam, they're like, all right, we're making him throw to beat us. We're not going to let this team power run on us and just load the box. So I think they do want to run. That's the identity they've won. I think it's the identity they've wanted for a couple of years, actually. Even when going back to the Super Bowl they won in 2018, like, Brady was the quarterback, but that team had a ton of success on the ground.
I have a fun hypothetical for you, but go ahead, Ryan, before I do.
I was going to talk about then, are you anticipating then Buffalo stacking the box, challenging or daring Newton to throw, especially with the weather conditions and what we've seen the last few weeks? So is that something that you see happening on Sunday with the Bills saying, hey, listen, we're going to make you beat us with your arm?
Absolutely. Load the box and make Cam beat you with the arm, and with that cast of receivers right now who, there's nobody that's jumping off the page at you. And I think it's one of those where, like, if Cam Newton, those receivers beat you through the air in a monsoon in your Buffalo, I think you just kind of tip your cap and you're like, all right. But you just can't let the Patriots run the ball down your throat because that's what they want to do.
Yeah, this is definitely, especially with Gilmore in doubt, this is definitely a game that, it just has all the makings for that ultimate disappointment that Bills fans have experienced for decades. I mean, because everything is pointing to just an absolute massacre in this game. I mean, you look at what the Bills offense did the first 4 weeks of the season. I know the weather is going to be a problem. The way the defense has traditionally played, against Tom Brady under Sean McDermott has been actually pretty good. It's been the offense that hasn't been able to score enough points. But I want to ask you before I get your pick and get you out of here, a hypothetical, because I think that this defense, you take a look at it at all three levels, they're missing pieces from last year, whether it be free agent guys that are gone, Kyle Van Noy, Jamie Collins, you got Donta Hightower that opted out. You mentioned Patrick Chung. If Bill Belichick could take one single player that was on the roster last year in the starting lineup and insert him for this game, like who are they missing the most? Who would he insert for this game?
Hightower, 1,000%. Their linebackers have had a very difficult time in coverage this year. That's been exposed, and he was a beast in the run game, and they have been getting run on too. So I think without question, it's Hightower.
Very interesting. And he's somebody that I think has played exceptionally well against the Bills. He's been somebody that has frustrated, I think, Josh Allen in the 3 games that he's played against them. And so, yeah, I think that's a great pick. Speaking of pick, who do you got? And I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot if you usually put this out later in the week or if you don't do it at all, but what's your how do you think this game's going to play out?
So this is coming to masslive.com at 6 a.m. tomorrow, but I'll let you guys in on it. I have the Bills in this game. I think it's going to be ugly. I think it's going to be a rock fight, and I think it's going to look like monsoon football, but ultimately I think Buffalo is just the more well-rounded team, and I see them winning this game.
Chris Mason, my man, delivering in a big way on a Friday night at 6 o'clock. I appreciate it. Why don't you let everybody know, I'll let them know where they can find you, @by Chris Mason on Twitter. Let them know what you got coming here so they can go check it out before the game.
So, yeah, we have a huge game preview that drops on Saturday mornings, matchups, predictions, well, a more in-depth prediction, point spreads, quotes, everything you want there. So, we've got mega preview drops tomorrow at 6 a.m.
Awesome. Getting you ready for the game from the Patriots perspective. Chris Mason, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy the game on Sunday.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on, guys.
All right, man. Take care. All right, we will be right back. Before we do continue, a quick word from our sponsor.
Ready for football? Tops is with ready-to-serve fan favorites everyone will cheer for. Delicious family or party packs like pizza, sliders, fried chicken, barbecue, or beef on weck, starting at only $4 per serving. Perfect for game day and any day. Only at Tops.
All right, Bills fans, we are going to preview this game a little bit more from the Bills' perspective here to close out the show. If you have any specific questions, the next 10 to 15 minutes, put them in here, and we'll try to get them before we get out of here on this Friday night, one day before Halloween. Let's start with Josh Allen, because I'm writing a bit about this right now. It's going to come out on the site tomorrow about, just the history between Josh now and Bill Belichick. It's 3 matchups. It's 3 matchups where for the most part, Josh hasn't been very good. Now, you take the first game, his rookie season, and you just throw it out. I mean, I don't really want to use that at this point because I think he's a completely different player in a completely different place. But you take the 2 games from last season and the progression that he made from the first game to the second game. And actually, he really pinpoints that first game as the one that completely changed the course of his career, where he basically went back to the drawing board, apologized to everybody in the organization, players, coaches, Brandon Beane even, and said, I'm going to, be more committed to taking care of the football. So now you fast forward to this matchup and everything we've seen since week 16 last year, where I still think they frustrated him and confused him at times into some, I don't want to say mistakes because he didn't throw any interceptions, but to where he wasn't making plays. And he also wasn't really able to, get drives moving most of the time. The couple big plays that they hit were the reason the game was so close in the end. So, Ryan, let's start with your expectations for Josh in this game.
Well, first and foremost, I think you're going to see a much higher completion percentage. And I'm not saying it's going to hover around 70. I know it's going to be in a monsoon. I know the winds are going to be up there in that 40, 50 mile an hour range. But correct me if I'm wrong, but he's hovering around 48% in those first few games in terms of a completion percentage. That's ugly. That's not going to get the job done. If Gilmore's not playing, that opens up a lot for Stephon Diggs. You have John Brown returning. You obviously have Cole Beasley in the slot. We've seen that defenses lately have been playing Josh Allen to sustain drives, hit the short passes, and Allen has been very accurate there. So one, I think you're going to see more accuracy from Allen. I don't know if you're going to see that many deep shots because of the weather, but if they get the wind at their back, you might see him try one or two here and there. And you're right, he had some success with that last year. Dawson Knox for a near touchdown before halftime. That big play to John Brown in the second half of that second game. So there's going to be some opportunities there, but it's going to come down to not turning over the football and not just via interception. I think you're going to see a lot of running in this game from Buffalo's backs, but also from Josh Allen. And he needs to make sure he tucks that ball away because we've seen he has a history of getting the ball knocked out from behind, taking a hit from the side, and the ball goes out. So he needs to protect the football first and foremost.
Yeah, I think this to me, and I'm a little bit like, if the weather is really as bad as, some people are fearing, I think you kind of have to throw this game out in terms of, how Josh Allen matches up against Bill Belichick. But I think that this is like a real measuring stick game for him. He struggled against Kansas City a little bit. He struggled against Tennessee more so. Came back and took what the defense gave him, had 300 yards passing without really ever stretching the field, going deep down the field. And that to me is, progress. I mean, I mentioned it on the radio today. Could you imagine in his rookie year, as we were talking about the inaccuracies and, his all the struggles and all the issues that people had with his game, if you could give somebody a crystal ball and show them that stat line that he, completed, more than 65% of his passes, threw for 300 yards in a game with no touchdowns, and just continuously move the football. I think a lot of people would have said, I don't know if he's going to ever be that kind of player. So he's made good decisions. And one of the things I thought that really jumped out at me this week is how Bill Belichick has talked about Josh. And you got to be careful with that because, a lot of times he's known for wanting to puff guys up and make them feel good about themselves. Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer joked about that with me 2 years ago. But what he said is he's so much better now at going to a second and third option and remaining calm in those moments, and making better decisions in those moments. And that's what we've been talking about and what we've been seeing, from him for the most part this season. And decision-making against this defense is so huge because even when they throw something at you, and let me just bring up this quote here because I think it's an important one to what I'm trying to say. Okay, let me see. I have so much stuff from this week, Ryan. I've been writing all this stuff from all these different guys. It's in one big document, so I'm sorry. Cole Beasley said when I asked him about the biggest shift from Josh Allen against the Patriots last year and the guy that's walking into this game today, and he said he's really learned how to manage the situations where they're in a good position to take away what we have called on offense. Dable does a good job of mixing it up, but there's sometimes that they happen to make the right call on defense. Josh has done a lot better job of managing those situations and not trying to force anything. He's so competitive. He wants to win every single play. He's learned that sometimes they got the upper hand and you just got to take care of the rock and minimize bad plays. That's the key too. Minimize the bad plays. Like he's done a good job, even against the Patriots, not turning the ball over, not throwing those bad interceptions. But when you take a bad sack or you try to force the ball in those PFF, interceptable passes, we joke about those, but you don't want them in this game because Bill Belichick, he's the guy that takes advantage of those kind of mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just the interceptions, like you said. We've seen it from Josh a few times this year where he takes a 10 or 12 yard sack on third down and drives his team out of field goal range. And he just makes one or two bad decisions here or there. He has to limit it. One or two bad decisions, fine, so be it. because for one or two bad decisions, he's going to do something similar in terms of scrambling, keeping a play alive, and he's going to hit something. He's going to find someone down the field, or he's going to run with the ball and make a play. You have to take the good with the bad. You can't just say, I only want the good plays in these situations. It'd be nice if the NFL worked that way, but it doesn't. So for every good play, or maybe for every two good plays, there's one bad. He just has to make sure he protects that football, doesn't try to squeeze it into Diggs. It's going to be very tempting for him, I think, to target Diggs early and often if the it's not maybe monsoon as we're anticipating, that the blowing sideways winds, rain, and everything else. If there's ever like a little taming period in that game, he's going to be tempted if Gilmore is out, and he still has to realize the Patriots are going to have a game plan for Diggs. They're going to try to take that best weapon away. So he has to be patient. He has to make sure that what he thinks he sees, he really does see on that field, because the Patriots can really play things up where they drop some guys back that look like they're coming, and a lot of different things. So Allen has to be on his A game for sure on Sunday.
Lone Wolf asks, watching on YouTube, how many fumbles Allen has this year. He's got 4, and he's lost, and the Bills have lost all 4 of them. 2 of them were against the Jets in the opener, 1 against the Rams, and then 1 again last week against the Jets. And what's funny is he's only fumbled in those 3 games against the Patriots. I was looking at some of his splits against the Patriots. He's only fumbled once in those 3 games. So that's a good sign. He really has protected the ball quite a bit. He's got 5 career interceptions against the Patriots, but those all came in 2 games. So I think he's come a long way in that department in terms of taking care of the ball. But I think you also want to see him make some plays in this game too. Huge game for Josh. We'll talk about him a lot after the game. Check out my piece tomorrow. Let's move into the injury report a little bit here, because the Bills are kind of getting healthy on the offensive line here. They're going to get back John Feliciano, we think, this week. I'm guessing he's going to be slotted in at left guard. That's where he was practicing all week. Brian Winters at right guard, and then still Mitch Morse in the middle, Deion Dawkins on the outside, and then Darrell Williams on the outside. And I think that's big, Ryan, because, I went back and watched the Patriots game last year, and they really didn't run the ball very well. They were healthy in that game on the offensive line, and I thought that they kind of struggled against that front for the Patriots. But now, you see all the guys that are banged up for the Pats. Lawrence Guy, a guy that everybody, fears in the middle of that defensive line, he's banged up. They've lost pieces. They've lost Kyle Van Noy's not there. That's a Hightower, Jamie Collins, all these different pieces. They're relying on a lot of young players. Anthony Jennings, Josh Uche, who's been out. He's not even going to be in the mix for this game, I don't believe. So I think the Bills, really, you get Feliciano back, you bring some of that nasty back into that huddle, and maybe you're Bobby Johnson, you motivate your guys and maybe get that run game going a little bit. Yeah,
that's going to be the key for this game. Zach Moss, Devin Singletary, you have to get them going. We saw what the 49ers did against the Patriots last week. They ran at will on them, and it wasn't just their top backs, because obviously they entered the game banged up at the running back position too. Jamichael, I want to say Hasty, came in and had like 57 yards and 9 carries. So anyone that came in was running the ball very well, very effectively. Now, Singletary and Moss have not had a lot of success this year on the ground. They're both averaging less than 4 yards per carry, but I thought that Zach Moss is coming off of his best game of the season. I thought he ran the ball very well last week. I don't think he hesitated at all. I feel like early in the year when he was healthy before he went out with that toe injury, he was kind of waiting for holes to develop instead of just kind of hitting the gap immediately and a little too hesitant. I didn't see that on Sunday. I want to see how he performs. I could see this being a Zach Moss game, that welcome to the NFL game that we've been waiting for. We know what Devin Singletary can do. He can make that first guy miss consistently. The problem for him this year is the first guy is usually in the backfield. So by the time he makes that guy miss, other defenders are swarming around him. So he's only getting 2-3 yard gains here and there. You have to hope that the return of John Feliciano opens things up for those running backs. Now, obviously, you can't expect him to come in and all of a sudden the Bills are rushing for 150, 200 yards a game. That's not who Feliciano is, but he's going to improve this run blocking unit. He's going to open up some lanes. He is going to be a breath of fresh air for this team in this game, in my opinion, and it could end up playing a big result in how, in terms of the final score.
Yeah, I think you covered it there. I was going to ask you Zach Moss or Devin Singletary, but I do think this could be a Zach Moss type of game. See a question in the comments about John Brown. 3 full days of practice. He does not have a game status designation, which usually means he is good to go to play on Sunday, and that's massive because if Stephon Gilmore can't play, the Patriots are going to be kind of in trouble in terms of trying to figure out how to stop Stephon Diggs and John Brown at the same time. I was really looking forward to that Diggs versus Gilmore matchup. I tweeted out earlier, in the offseason after the Bills traded for Diggs. Stephon Gilmore tweeted about Amari Cooper because Rex Ryan had made a goofy remark about him on ESPN. Yeah, surprise. Rex Ryan, goofy remark. And, Stephon Gilmore came in and said, hey, listen, man, Amari Cooper's tough. And a Bills fan replied and went back at him and said, well, yeah, good luck covering Stephon Diggs this season. And another fan, a Patriots fan, replied to him and said, that's easy work. And Stephon Gilmore liked it, Mr. Bump and Grind out there. And so I thought that was going to be such an exciting matchup. Diggs talked about how good this secondary is this week and what they have to do to beat them. So that would have been fun. But John Brown, back in the mix for the Bills, it seems like, which is very good news. Cody Ford's still out, so they're dealing with the injury there. Isaiah McKenzie, who had been dealing with an ankle injury all week, good sign. He was a full participant in practice today. He's still listed as questionable, but I'd imagine that he plays. Let's flip things over to the defensive side of the ball because there's a lot going on over there, Ryan. Let's start on the defensive line because you have 3 guys with designations of questionable. Jerry Hughes and Quinton Jefferson. Hughes with a foot, Jefferson with a knee. They are both questionable, but were both full on Friday. That's good news. Vernon Butler, who has been your kind of lean on one tech in the last game here as they've tried to figure things out, he is questionable with a groin injury, and he did not practice for the second straight day today. So we could be looking at no Vernon Butler on Sunday. Maybe Harrison Phillips asked to come back and contribute once again.
Yeah, I like that you call it the Harrison Phillips revenge game. He can come out here and maybe prove, I can still contribute. I can still play a fact here. But I do think that if Vernon Butler does not play, it's a significant loss to the Bills because I think both teams going to this game, it's going to be smash mouth based on the weather conditions. And if you don't have that one tech that can stop the run, plug up the run, it's going to be a long day at the office because the Patriots have no shortage of backs that can move the ball. You have Cam Newton, who, he has really struggled as a passer, but he can move the ball with his legs when called upon, when that's part of the game plan. So you need to be stout up front, and that's what Butler does well. Now, Justin Zimmer, when he's had to play in that one tech spot, he's fared pretty well, but you want to limit his reps a little bit. You don't want him in there significant reps. Harrison Phillips, he's struggled. He's hasn't looked like the same player before that ACL injury, and I think that was to be expected. You're coming off of a serious injury. So there's going to be a hole there in the middle of this defense, though, if Vernon Butler cannot play, and that's a little bit worrisome because like you said, this is one of those classic games where you go into it and you think, boy, everything's looking good for the Bills. And then in the fourth quarter, you're sitting there saying, what happened? Why aren't they winning this game? Why did they fall behind? If the Patriots can run successfully, they can keep the Bills offense off the field. They can drive down the field and put up points, whether it's field goals or touchdowns. The Bills need to show that they can stop the run. Add that extra man into the box, slow them down, but it all starts in the middle. And of those 3 players, while Jefferson and Hughes obviously have been much bigger factors overall this year, I think Butler would be the biggest loss if he cannot play on Sunday against the Patriots.
I'm with you there. The weather is going to be a little bit tricky, I think. We talked quite a bit about it today. But staying on the injury front, because there's 2 more important ones that I want to get to. Matt Milano revealed this week that he's playing with a partially torn pec muscle, which is crazy to me. I mean, football is a crazy physical game. I can't imagine the type of pain that he's dealing with while trying to be out there and play through that kind of injury. I've never done it before. Maybe we should have had on Banged Up Bills on here, our guy over there, to see if, what that's actually like, because from a physicality standpoint, that just seems crazy to me. He's limited for the game, or he's questionable for the game, limited all 3 days in practice, and he was in the red non-contact jersey all week this week. And when he was coming back early he was not. So obviously the toll that last week's game took on him in the limited role that he played was significant enough to say, okay, don't touch this guy all week. Micah Hyde is in the league's or the NFL's concussion protocol. He didn't practice any day this week. He's questionable as well. It is trending in the direction that he is not going to be available. And, I've seen a lot of chatter about Jaquan Johnson, the rookie that obviously popped a little bit against the Jets in week 17 last year. I think this is going to be a spot where the Bills put in Dean Marlowe, veteran guy. Trust is there from Sean McDermott going back to their time together in Carolina. He knows the defense. I think that's the safest bet for Sunday.
Yeah, I agree with that on the Marlowe point. I think, like you said it perfectly. Marlowe has been with McDermott since Carolina. He knows the ins and outs of this defense. He's not a flashy player, but considering the weather conditions, there's probably not going to be a lot of passing in this game. Mm-hmm. So he's going to be a reliable player there. I would like to see Jaquan get a few snaps mixed in here and there. You don't want to question coaching staff because they obviously know a lot more than we do, but I'd like to see Jaquan get a few snaps here and there because I think he is a big part of this future. I feel like Saran Neal in that secondary, I'm surprised he hasn't played as much as he has, considering Taron Johnson's struggles and things of that nature. So it's going to be interesting. But, the one thing I'll say about Micah Hyde is I agree with you. I think he's trending in the direction of not playing. If there's one player on this defense that could miss an entire week of practice and not miss a beat on the field, it's Micah Hyde. He knows everything about this defense. He's so important from that communication standpoint in terms of what he sees. But obviously you can't rush back from a concussion. It's going to depend on where he's at. But if he does clear the concussion protocol, I could see him playing on Sunday just based on how important he is to the scheme, but also just how well he knows the ins and outs. Linebacker position, we've seen what this team looks like without Matt Milano. It is worrisome that he says that it's not a complete tear because it could turn into a complete tear at any point in time here. And then you're left scrambling and wondering what's going to happen. And yeah, they're in the process of signing Darren Lee, former Jets first-round pick. But he never lived up to that hype. He is a great athlete. He could play an important role as a depth linebacker. But I don't want to see what happens if Milano misses significant time because we've seen the middle of this defense get picked apart when he has not been out there. So managing Milano throughout the rest of the season is so important to this defense. Obviously, I think Milano wants to be out there, one, because he's just a team player first and foremost, but two, this is a contract year for the guy. He wants to make as much money as possible, whether that's with the Buffalo or another team, and being available, being out there on the field and making those splash plays is what's going to help him following the season when he does hit the market or whether the Bills are negotiating with him up until that point.
Cole Wilkinson on YouTube makes a pretty good point here. He mentions Micah Hyde is more important to the pass D than the run D, so not as worried about him missing. And if you're going to have a game where, and obviously Micah Hyde is a very physical player. Like, you look at the play where he was penalized for the hit on Brashad Perryman last week, which who knows, maybe that was where the concussion occurred because you hate to speculate, but that was a pretty big collision. Dean Marlowe is a guy you get in here, and he is going to be a physical presence. He is going to put his helmet in there and try to make a statement early in this game, probably. I think we'll see how that plays out. Somebody's asking about is it worth looking into Don Terry Poe? You brought that question up. We talked a bit about him on the Wednesday podcast, so go check that out. But also, Ryan, there's been an update on that because Ian Rappaport's reporting it's going to be a little while.
Yeah, so Jerry Jones first and foremost said, "Oh, this guy was playing 30 pounds overweight and really didn't do anything about it." Well, I think in the offseason he was banged up still after he signed. He did show up overweight. He didn't have that traditional offseason to lose the weight. So he's trying to get right from the injury perspective, but probably also try to get into some better shape so he can sign with the contender here later on in the year. So don't look for Don Terry Poe to sign anywhere anytime too soon. You might be looking at that last quarter of the season for a time frame, maybe week 12 on. Now, if the Bills are contending at that point, which based on the looks of the AFC East, there's a very good chance they will be. If they're still looking for a one technique at that point, yeah, it makes a lot of sense because of that relationship he has with Eric Washington. But right now, he's not going to be the answer just because he's come out and said he's going to hold off for a little bit, get right, get healthy, which is something he's apparently been dealing with, not playing near 100% at all this season.
All right, prediction time, Ryan. We got to get out of here. It is Friday night. We want to drop a little 40-minute pod on you guys to get you ready for Sunday. Who you picking and how's it going to go?
Bills in an ugly game, 16-13.
I told you all week I was trending towards picking the Patriots. And I was staying with that pick all the way up until yesterday when the Stephon Gilmore news broke. And, you look, there's no excuses here, Ryan. This is, somebody shared a clip from Pat McAfee and tagged me on Twitter. And he basically said, listen, the Bills have been getting their stuff stomped for years in this rivalry. And it's time for them to punch back. And there's no excuses. You got John Brown back. The offense is whole. You're missing some guys on defense, but you're going up against one of the worst offenses in the NFL. And N'Keal Harry's out. Julian Edelman's out. Sony Michel's on IR. They're down some offensive linemen. Joe Tooney's questionable. Shaq Mason's dealing with a calf. He's questionable. What more do you want? Go out there, punch this team in the face. Jerry Hughes said that's the plan. 2017 Buffalo Bills win to take a commanding lead in the division. We'll see what the Miami Dolphins do as well. But I'm picking the Bills. Thank you so much for watching. Ryan, what do you got going on the rest of the weekend here? And final thought.
Rest of the weekend, I'm going to look at some more trade targets. I was actually going to go with Thomas Davis, but now that the Bills signed Lee, I don't know if they necessarily need that depth piece. So I'm going to maybe look and see what else is out there in terms of being a good fit for the Bills. I'll have something up on the site about that tomorrow. I'll have a little blurb in your prediction coming out tomorrow too. And then obviously stay with us all day Sunday. We will have obviously our how to watch the game, report card, instant observations. And then later that night, we will have our post-game podcast, which fingers crossed, the Bills will have a big win that will have a lot of Bills fans happy going into that second half of the season.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that will do it. Like Ryan said, keep it locked on at Syracuse.com, NewYorkUpstate.com all weekend. I'm going to drop the big preview tomorrow. I got a Josh Allen, Bill Belichick story you're going to want to check out. I wrote about Jerry Hughes earlier in the week. Go check that out. I even put up a little story on Ed Oliver and Cam Newton. We asked him about that altercation last year. So that's some fun stuff as well. Find us on all the audio platforms if you can. A good reminder in the comments on YouTube, if you do consume the show live on YouTube, make sure you turn notifications on so you can always hop on with us when we go live. Subscribe, rate, and review on all the audio platforms. And we'll be back Sunday evening, 7:30. That's going to be a new practice, by the way, on for home games, especially home games. We're going to do 7:30, which will be after the late games are done and before Sunday Night Football. Kind of hit you in that middle window. So we could talk about your Bills game that day. For Ryan Talbot, I am Matt Perino. We will see you on Sunday.
Ready for football? With every game a home game, Tops is ready for you with its TV a Day giveaway. For 6 weeks, every day you shop is a new chance to win a massive 70-inch 4K TV. Shop Tops for the best deals in town, in-store, or online.